to a riot in Little India, the way we respond collectively actually says more about our character as a nation than what we say in panels or in discussions. And this is where sometimes I feel a bit worried. Signs that there are a minority of people who may react in ways that we feel is not part of our values, xenophobic behavior, behavior that looks down on the marginalized groups that want to keep them at the borders of society, at the fringes of society, like the poor, the elderly. And I think this is something that we should stand up clearly and have a clear position on. And if all of us can play our part, even individually or even in groups, to gather people together as a civic society and not to rely on the government to provide the solutions all the time. We can give you the policies, we can give you the funding, give you the direction and the support, but it is for the civic society to step forward and take ownership of this, and then that will be a new social compact.
Speaking of this idea of marginalized groups, I want to bring in the next question. The lady in black had a question.
So with 21,000 people joining in Pink Dot this year, June, so the question I have for perhaps the panel is that how true was the Singapore conversation in reflection of the citizens' view, especially when the 12 perspective and the 5 shared values has never mentioned anything about our concerns regarding equal rights for the LGBT community?
Anyone in particular you'd like to respond?
Perhaps MP Irene Ng?
Well, our society is getting more and more diverse. We accept that and we listen to the voices on the ground. And I have many good friends who are gays, and I love them. So it's personally, I have no problems with gays at all. But from the society's point of view, there's a conservative faction. So as a government in charge, they have to listen to the voices of everyone and then move in the direction that the majority wants, as in most of our policies. Just like on foreigners, some of us have very strong views against it, some of us have very strong views for it. So the government has to make a decision based on what they feel is the majority view. And that's the role of the government.
Bertha, Gerald, I want to bring you in on this. Gerald, let me start with you.
I think what is very important is that people of both persuasions, of different persuasions, should feel free to step forward and speak up. And I think that's something that I feel very gratified seeing this year and in the recent years of many Singaporeans literally grabbing the microphone and speaking out what their honestly held views are. And I think it's important that all views are heard, and that even those who may have been silent in the past should feel free to speak up and speak forward with their honestly held views, because I think that is where we can take our society forward when people step forward.
Bertha?
I want to give a different point of view regarding the haze. I think too often we're very navel-gazing people. We just look at our belly button. So far what we've discussed is very internal, but I think the haze brought home to us the fact that we are a very, very small country, and that, just to get our big neighbors to do something, we have to go and find a lot of friends and get together and force them to do something. And I think in our discussions going forward, sometimes we have to take into account this geopolitical fact that we are not on our own, so to speak, that there are many other things that will bother us, and before we start talking about different groups' rights and the things that affect our country internally. So that's what I thought the haze brought home to me. Yeah.
Well, you see, that's what I like, because the haze and the white paper on population and all that, it's not just about Singaporeans speaking out. It's about getting more and more Singaporeans to come together, cross our differences, and I think that's the thing, because we are products of a culture of hierarchy, and that's why anything we complain, we go to an MP. If not, we go to an NMP. If not, we go to opposition party. We don't turn around and we say, hey, can we work together? There was a group of parents, autistic children, and I think they went to MOE, and I think MOE was slow in responding. But as a last resort, they started to work together. Yeah, but why is that the last resort? You can go to the MP, go to the NMP, go to all opposition party and all that, but concurrently, where is the civil society, people sector action? And so that's why in Singapore, I want to glimpse and see a glimmer of that, because if that happens, then there can be people power, so to speak. So it's not just civic society, but I'm talking about civil society. So, GLBT and all that, how to work across differences. Don't just GLBT, but how to work with straight people, how to work with other people, and and be inclusive. So until we reach that point where we can be inclusive and learn to negotiate among ourselves, our diversity and differences, we can't move from words to action.
Hi, I'm Nabil. Just to make a comment about how the two major challenges that I feel personally was the haze and the floods that affected Singapore actually brought some group of people together. I know some very young people who came together to just give away masks at their neighborhood or come together and do that, and then it actually stirred up a community of people to just come together and help them out. They started posting things on social media. So what happens then is, what happens to this group of people? You know, what is the support there? As much as the government comes in and authorities comes in and regulate and all that, how can we support such movements? Or what's next for them? How can they then contribute more and get on board? Anyone on the panel, perhaps? MP3. Yeah.
I think the haze example is an excellent example. I mean, over and above the geopolitical issues which Bertha mentioned, there are two aspects to the haze problem. If you think about it, Singapore will have early warning of just about a few hours before the haze hits us. Once we detect the haze before it hits us. It will take more than that in order for all the masks in the warehouses to be distributed to everyone. So what happens in the interim? Two things happen. Number one, Singaporeans and families should know that this is a seasonal event, and we should really be prepared ourselves. Many of us didn't have masks in our own homes when this haze hit us, because by and large, I think because it wasn't such a serious problem in the past. So we were caught individually unprepared as well. So that's one thing to learn. But the other brilliant thing, of course, you mentioned the youngsters and all these groups came together, started distributing masks, because there are limits to what the government can do. The government can bring the masks to the distribution centers, can get the grassroots leaders to distribute it, but there will always be gaps for individuals and groups within society to help others, and the haze brought out the best in Singaporeans. So it was a great example of how that came about.
Time to take a quick break, but when we return, we answer more of your questions on events that shaped the year 2013 for Singapore. Stay with us.
Right now, MDA, we've seen them crack down on Ashley Madison, for instance, because of family values and whatnot, and we see them cracking down on sites willing to play ball. But they don't seem to be going after sites that are known for impersonating people of opposition, spreading phobia.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. We're looking at all the biggest news events that shaped Singapore in 2013. We're going to take a few more questions from the audience right now. First question. Go ahead, young man.
Well, my name is Edward. Why is it that Singapore, Singaporean for say, is now a nation of expecting rather than a nation of giving? I mean, like, for example, we expect the government to do something about the riots. Why didn't the government do something about it? Why did they let the riot comes up? Why did they let the strike to comes up? So they expect the government to do a lot. Why can't we ourselves do something about it?
Well, I think it is a reflection of, I think, the trust people have put in the government, and the fact that over the last 40, 50 years, the government has done very well, has delivered on its promises, have improved the lives of a whole generation of people. And whenever we are faced with a difficult problem, we've managed to find solutions, or better solutions than most other countries. So there is an expectation that government will continue to deliver. But having said that, I agree with Edward that there is more scope for people to step forward, to take responsibility, take charge, to bring their own inputs and initiatives into the community and to society. I think we will all be the better for it.
There are areas that the government is responsible for, and there are areas where the people are responsible for. I've mentioned earlier on areas where the people should step forward to educate their children and to guide their children. But there are also areas in which I feel the government is in charge of, and maybe is not taking enough charge of. For example, in the area of healthcare financing, we've debated that in Parliament. We've talked about that. That's an ongoing issue where we feel that the government needs to step forward and assist people more in terms of financing healthcare. So I think it's not just about not expecting from the government, but I think it's important to realize that there are certain areas where the government is responsible for and should take responsibility for.
Bertha?
I think we might be a bit too hard on ourselves, you know. There are a lot of people doing a lot of giving, and, you know, and I would like to point to the much maligned online people, and there are plenty of sites which demonstrate that people do a lot of giving. One big move against poverty. There's a huge movement trying to do something about alleviating the plight of the poor. You know, practically to an extent that, you know, it is basically locking horns, so to speak, with government on definitions. So, you know, there are people doing it, and increasingly more people are not just doing, but they're also asking about what is the best way to do it.
And I sometimes feel that giving also is, it gets political because there are people that give, you know, like they are online, they are writing for free, pro bono, and even artists, when they are critical about the country, sometimes they are framed as troublemakers, you know, bloggers and all that. But I sometimes see them as giving in the sense that they're giving different perspectives, different voices, people that are invisible in society, people are at the fringe. They give of their time, you know. I mean, if you don't care, you would leave Singapore with your family and just quit. But there are people here that struggle, and the care sometimes is not celebrated as giving.
Actually, on the ground, we see great acts of generosity. The Nickel Highway crash, the resident was my resident, and the widow had 2 young kids. So I put an appeal for donation to support the family, and the donors that came in were taxi drivers. They were all the average men in the street, and the amount raised was enough to see the child through until university. You know, so there's many great examples we can quote of Singaporeans who go beyond what is usual in terms of how they help one another. But then again, there are also surveys that show otherwise, like the World Giving Index 2013 by the UK-based Charities Aid Foundation found that Singapore ranked second last out of 135 countries, 134 out of 135 countries in terms of helping a stranger. And that worries me. But on the ground, we do see people helping one another, but we hope that over time it will become a norm.
Okay. My question is directed at everyone here. It's in light of the fact that we're talking about social compacts and everything, especially looking back all that has happened, I'd like to ask, a lot happens online, but right now MDA, we've seen them crack down on Ashley Madison, for instance, because of family values and whatnot, and we see them cracking down on sites willing to play ball, but they don't seem to be going after sites that are known for impersonating people of opposition, spreading falsehoods, xenophobia, etc. All the things that are very important to our social fabric, these sites threaten, and nothing is done. So, panel, what do you think?
I've spoken on this in Parliament before. I think it's difficult for any legislation or any regulation to provide for every given situation. There are some sites or some commentary or some posts which may affect society at large, and some may just infect certain individuals. What we lack, and I think we can do a better job on, is providing the facility for individuals or groups who are aggrieved to take up the matter. So, for example, if there's an anonymous posting on you or your family, it takes a lot of time and resources for you to discover who is actually behind it. Because that means taking out applications and so on and so forth. So it's very difficult for people to enforce their rights if they've been damaged against others on the net. And one thing we can do is provide a facility for that. But on the larger point, where the regulators are concerned, it's very difficult to, as I said, legislate for every situation, which is why the MDA regulations tend to be very broad-based and very general. And I think that's how it should be. But going forward, maybe we can fine-tune it better.
I feel that we ourselves, netizens and all that, can do it ourselves. Like a friend of mine says, if you put up, and if any of you put up a posting from this site, I will unfriend you. So sometimes you don't have to look to the government with, for all the solutions. You see. Among ourselves, then what can we actually do?
I think to some extent, self-regulation helps. Yeah. But it's not a complete cure. I think there will be instances where we have individuals, Singaporeans, who will be genuinely aggrieved. I mean, if your face and name is put up and you're accused of doing something heinous or terrible, you will want some recourse or some ability to go after someone who has damaged you. And we don't have that particular facility. It's pretty difficult right now for you to do it. And maybe we can help in that aspect.
We're going to have to leave 2013 in the past right now, because that's all the time we have for tonight. I want to thank my guests on the panel and our studio audience, and for you at home for tuning in. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week when we discuss what lies ahead in 2014. I'm Daniel Martin. This has been Look Back at 2013. Merry Christmas and compliments of the season to all. Take care.